everyone. This is Eric Gardner with podcast 14 of our little series, and a lot's been going on. As you're aware, the market, the Federal Reserve, now Jamie Dimon's coming out. You know, he's kind of like the guy who made it through the 2008 Great Recession unscathed. He leads what bank is it? I don't know. Jamie Dimon's bank. I think it's Bank of America. Let's see here. Oh, JP Morgan. So, like I said, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, he just came out with he was in a news conference or a conference with some investors and some high profile people in JP Morgan. And he is one of the only banks that made it through the 2008 Great Recession, pretty well. So a lot of people have been listening to him over the last, 12 years since that occurred, or 14 years. And so he had some pretty strong things to say. We've talked a lot about the economy recently because the Federal Reserve is doing a lot to, slow the economy, take down inflation. In fact, Jay Powell of the Federal Reserve met with President Biden this last week. So a lot, that's a big focus for everyone right now. And there's been a lot of talk of, layoffs, recession, lots of, mortgage companies that laid people off, other companies that, I hear about, not necessarily more real estate related, but others are also, doing layoffs, in preparation, a little bit concerned about a possible recession. Elon Musk mentioned yesterday that he wants to decrease his workforce by 10%. But Jamie Dimon, his comments were that, between the war in Ukraine and inflation, he's super worried about oil prices, commodity prices, shooting up to $150 a barrel. I think right now they're floating around $115. And with that $115, we see, prices at the pump around $4.50 to $5, at least here in Utah. They're higher even elsewhere. But, those things, when we talk about oil turns into fuel, oil goes into a lot of manufacturing. That can push prices up across the entire economy. Everything gets delivered by truck, which uses oil. So it's really concerning when you have these geopolitical issues around the globe with, Russia still fighting in Ukraine. I heard last that they occupy about 20% of Ukraine now. But it's those things that are going to continue to, while Jerome Powell and the Fed is trying to calm inflation in the United States, they can't control these geopolitical problems elsewhere. So Jamie Dimon's warning against that because oil can't be controlled necessarily by us. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he did release some of the oil from our strategic reserve. I think that was like 3 or 4 months ago. But outside of that, there's little we can do except, drill baby drill, which, that's another issue. But just think about that when we're having this inflation conversation or this economic conversation. There's more that goes into a recession than a housing bubble. The last one in 2008 and 9, that recession was caused by a housing bubble. The recession in 2020 was caused by a pandemic. And this one currently, well, we're not even in it yet, technically, because recessions, we got to look back on them. It's 2 consecutive quarters of poor GDP growth. So right now we're not even in it, but people are warning about one possibly occurring. And I think a lot of businesses are preparing just in case, you want to make sure you got some powder dry when things go wrong. So I think a lot of companies are doing that. And even as households, like a lot of households need to do the same thing, have a good emergency fund. So while I think a lot of people still are spending a lot because there's a lot of money in the economy, we saw the federal government passed out, child care money, all stimulus money. And so I think for a lot of people, it's good to, make sure you got hay in the barn for any possible things that happen. And if nothing happens, then great. You got hay in the barn and you're good. You got a good cushion. You got a good savings. But just be prepared. Regarding the housing market, listings are definitely going up. So we've mentioned this a few times. In January, active listings on the Wasatch Front Utah MLS was about 1,500. And I check this, every Monday or Tuesday. This last Monday or Tuesday, it was about just over 5,000 active listings on the Utah MLS. So it's gone up a lot. What's causing that? Well, first, demand's eased a little bit. Supply, I think some people, maybe they're trying to cash out now because they think, with the recession's going to happen, they got to get their money now. I know a few people who have been selling rentals. And then also just families like to move during the summer because school's out now. So they're like, this is when we move. Inventory always increases during the summer. It's a normal trend that happens every year. So I think all three of those things are really playing into this inventory equation. Like I've mentioned before, certain price points, certain neighborhoods are still super competitive. We got an offer accepted this week, and I was just talking to the listing agent, and they had 4 offers on the listing. So, while that's not the 30 offers we were seeing last year, it's still a competitive environment, and that's in the $400,000 price range. That is a competitive price range for sure. So just take that into account when you're buying or selling, that depending on where you're at, your condition, your price, that's all going to play into how you get people to compete for your home to get you the most money when you're selling. But aside from that, I think the market's still moving along. I think a lot of sellers are probably pricing their home as if it was a few months ago, because we're starting to see some, price cuts, price decreases because they started too high. They're pricing their home for the market from 3 months ago, not the market of today. So when you're talking to an agent selling your home, make sure you take that into account because the market is still creeping up, I think, with appreciation, demand, but it's not going up like it was 3 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. So just take that into account. Like right now with real estate, I'm not seeing, any big indicators that the bottom's falling out. Underwriting is still very strong. Underwriting changed a lot after the Great Recession. So things are good, I think. I think we're really getting back to, when I was talking to that agent today, we're getting back to that pre-pandemic market, which was a very healthy market. And I hope that's where we land. And, we have a soft landing with the inflation problem. But from what I'm reading on the news, people, even though there's inflation, they're still spending. We'll see how things play out in the next month or two, but people are still traveling. Demand for flights and for driving are just through the roof. Part of it's like they were, locked up for 2 years in the pandemic, didn't travel much. So now they want to get out and they're paying for it, with flights and gas, etc. So, while inflation's there, people are still spending money. And so we'll see how things cool off, and hopefully we can have a soft landing like Jerome Powell is talking about with the inflation conversation. Next, I wanted to just discuss, if you follow me on social media, you probably know that I do a fair amount, not a lot, of Dutch oven cooking. So we went camping last weekend. We actually got snowed on. We went to Payson Lakes, which is about 8,000 feet elevation. I had been there once, but I'd never camped there. So we went up there over Memorial Day. And like I mentioned before about winter, we got snowed on, we got hailed on. There was rain Saturday night into Sunday. And then Sunday, we were actually going to go ride bikes. And as we're going to ride bikes, it just starts hailing. And it was a lot of hail. So we went back to the camp. We got under cover to protect ourselves. But throughout Sunday, it was sun, hail, sun, snow, sun, more snow. And we woke up to the next morning, probably like an inch of snow. But with that, I wanted to just mention these Dutch oven cooking. So I found this new breakfast recipe. Usually for breakfast when I go camping, I do like the griddle type thing, and I make like eggs or bacon and pancakes, something like that. That's so much work when you're cooking food. I know that's kind of traditional, but Dutch oven cooking is so much easier because everything ends up being like a casserole or like a lasagna, something like that, where you just layer it all in, put the coals on the top, put the coals on the bottom, and let it cook for 45 minutes. So this new breakfast recipe, I'm going to put the recipe in the comments, but basically you start with some sort of sausage on the bottom, then you do hash browns, then you do eggs, then you do bell peppers, then you do cheese, and then you do biscuits on top. So the one we made this last weekend, we actually made it a vegan, so it was like Beyond sausage, which is really tasty, then hash browns, and then we did just egg. It's like an egg substitute, really good. and then did some vegan cheese on that, the bell peppers. Then instead of doing like the canned biscuits, because that's what the recipe originally called for, was like those pre-made biscuits, we actually use like a cornbread, basically, which is what we use for chili also when we're cooking. But I was so impressed with this Dutch oven recipe, I'm going to add it to the list of just regular stuff I cook because it was so simple. The biggest thing to remember when you're cooking with Dutch oven is just making sure you get your coals done early. So when it's time to cook and eat, you have hot coals ready to go so it'll actually cook your meal. Because if your coals are only halfway, cooked through, it's going to take even longer. It's not going to take the 40 to 45 minutes for the recipe. It's going to take forever. And I've dealt with that many times. So the best thing to do, you wake up, you start your campfire or start your coals and let that go going for, 40 minutes, an hour. And then once those coals are good and hot, that's when you can start cooking on the Dutch oven. But, as you probably noticed, we love camping, and Dutch ovens is just a fun family thing. My dad was big into Dutch ovens. The Dutch ovens I use are the ones I've posted before about. They're all his. He engraved our last name onto them. So good stuff. But aside from that, I actually went to a doctor's appointment yesterday, and I ran into an old friend that I went to school with at Utah State. And we were chatting. We've seen each other probably 3 times in the last 10 years. I don't know. But it's always fun to catch up because he's a super sharp guy, and we have a lot of the same interests, actually. But he mentions to me that, he in Logan, we all went to school in Logan at Utah State. He actually, 4 or 5 years ago, bought a 12-plex, which is really cool. Him and a friend, they came together, bought this 12-plex that kind of fell in their lap. And since then, they've slowly grown this portfolio to like 22 units now. They did this BRRRR strategy on the other 10 units they bought. And so BRRRR strategy, if you don't know, it's buy, you rehab it, then you rent it out, and then you refinance it, and then you repeat that. Because you're buying a discount property because it's just, in disarray. And so you buy that, you do all the repairs to make it livable, make it rentable, then you rent it out so you have rents to borrow against. And then you do that cash out refinance where you try and pull as much equity out as you can. So you can pull your initial investment out is maybe the better way to say it. So then you have your 20 to 25% down that you need for a commercial or an investment loan. And the rest of it you can pull back out to do it again. And that's the BRRRR strategy. And they did that on this other multi-unit, which is super cool. But the reason I bring this up is because no matter what kind of tools for retirement you're looking at, whether it's a stock market, bonds, whatever kind of investing you're into, a little bit of real estate investing can actually go a long way because, when you buy a property, there's appreciation, there's rents that are paying down your mortgage, and there's also a little bit of cash flow typically. And all that appreciation, a few years down the road, you can sell, 1031 exchange into another property, and if you take time, over 10 years, it's very simple to grow a small portfolio. That's going to pay dividends in the future. Like I said, Ann and I, when we first moved to Salt Lake, we bought a duplex, 2 units. We lived in one, we rented out the other. That's called house hacking. House hacking is a very simple way for first-time home buyers or younger buyers to qualify for more because you can count the rents from the other units to help you qualify for more, and then you live in one and you rent out the other. But while you're doing that, usually your tenant in the other half is paying most of your mortgage. Maybe you're paying part of it. And then down the road, when maybe you want to upgrade, get something bigger, you could maybe keep it, or you could sell it and roll all that equity that you probably have into your personal residence, or maybe into like a 4-plex or an 8-plex, something like that. But there's always, you see all these people always post, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. Most of the time that's true. It's good to get in whenever you can and then let that appreciation occur. And that's kind of what I wanted to mention with that. But start small and just slowly build up, and you're going to have success over the long term. Whenever I analyze a property, no matter where the market's at, right now people are talking about recession. As long as you're in a growing jobs market where jobs aren't leaving, and as long as the rents will pay the mortgage, I think you're safe. You know, even if the market dips, like home values, say they crash, as long as the jobs are staying and people aren't moving out of the community, then they're able to pay rent, and that rent is able to pay your mortgage on that property, you're fine. That loss in equity is just a paper loss. It's not actualized yet. So just something to think about when, if you're a first time home buyer, or if you want to get into investing or multi-unit investing, these are all really safe. Like, I'm not a huge risk taker. I take a fair amount of risk, but when buying real estate, I'm pretty conservative with like, will the cash flow work? Will the people stay here, and will it pay for the mortgage? Because even if the market crashes, it's still going to pay for it. There's going to be principal pay down by those tenants. And long term, there's going to be equity in the property that you can roll to something else. But that's what I wanted to cover for today. Be confident in our economy. I'm very confident in our economy, even if there's these bumps in the road with inflation, stimulus, all those things. Over the long term, I think we have an amazing country, an amazing economy. So just think about that. Thanks for joining me on Podcast 13. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below, and I'll see you next time.